First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 9 o'clock. This is Dan Wootton Tonight with me, Mark Dolan. The NHS is 75 today, and despite the North Korean-style celebrations on our state broadcaster... Happy birthday, NHS! This isn't a happy birthday because our National Health Service is broken. So isn't it time we took the old girl off life support? I'll be making my case for pulling the plug next. Before my superstar panel weigh in, tonight I'm joined by Baroness Jacqueline Foster, Adam Brooks and Matthew Larser. Also coming up, with plunging poll ratings and accusations he's completely given up, should Rishi Sunak call Labour's bluff and hold a snap general election? That's our big debate later in the show. Elsewhere tonight, following a shocking backlash to King Charles's Scottish coronation, is our new monarch strong enough to see off the growing Republican threat? Anti-monarchist campaigner Riz Posnet takes on staunch royalist Niall Gardner in what promises to be a fiery clash. Plus, Paul Burrell reacts to reports that Meghan's humiliating axing by Spotify has her plotting solo projects away from the radioactive brand of the Sussexes. And is the royal marriage on the rocks? Paul Burrell's analysis unmissable as always. Also on the way, are young girls who oppose dangerous gender-neutral toilets being silenced by the extreme trans lobby. Former teacher and social commentator Tonya Buxton has some worrying exclusive reporting on this issue shortly. And after the banking scandal sparked by Nigel Farage, is Britain in the grip of a communist-style takeover? Former England football legend Matt Le Tissier broke the internet with that suggestion, and he's live in a couple of minutes. Sparks will fly. Tomorrow's front page is on the way too, hot off the press, and I'll crown a new Greatest Britain and Union jackass before the night is out. This is Dan Wootton Tonight with me, Mark Dolan, with you for the next couple of weeks. Let's go. You're watching GB News, Britain's news channel, the People's Channel. My monologue on why it should be 75 and out for the NHS. That's next. You won't want to miss it. I'm not pulling my punches. But first, the headlines with the ever-healthy Polly Middlehurst.
Thank you, Mark. Well, good evening to you. A record waiting list has cast something of a shadow over the NHS's 75th anniversary. Political leaders, though, along with members of the royal family, paid tribute to staff who work in the NHS during a ceremony at Westminster Abbey in London today. But it comes as Labour warned the NHS will die without further investment and modernisation. 7.4 million people are currently on waiting lists, with the government acknowledging that number could get worse before it gets better. The Shadow Health Secretary says the NHS is facing the worst crisis in its history.
Deeply angry about the two-tier system we have in our country today, where those who can afford it are paying to go private and those who can't afford it are being left behind. And my answer would be, in the short term, where there is spare capacity in the private sector, we should be paying for it on NHS terms so that people who can't afford it are getting it free at the point of use. That would be my answer. I've got no objection to using private sector capacity to get NHS waiting lists down faster.
Wes Streeting speaking earlier on today. Now, the Wimbledon Tennis Championships were disrupted by Just Stop Oil demonstrations twice this afternoon. One protester was arrested on suspicion of aggravated trespass and criminal damage after orange confetti was strewn across Court 18. That's after two other activists were detained for targeting the same court. The group says it took action because of the tournament's sponsorship deal with Barclays Bank, which it says has given £30 billion to oil and gas companies over the last 2 years. Now, there's anger over plans which would see the closure of almost every railway station ticket office in England. The proposal, unveiled by the Rail Delivery Group, affects hundreds of stations, with facilities only expected to remain open at the busiest stations. Disability charities and unions are among those who voiced their concerns, saying it's going to impact vulnerable people and will lead to job losses. The decision about which offices will be closed will be made after a consultation process. A council is launching legal action against the Home Secretary over the number of migrant children arriving on its shores. Kent County Council says it's under a wholly disproportionate strain due to hundreds of unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. Despite a national scheme to distribute migrants across counties, the location of Dover's port means that Kent is affected more than others. Council bosses say the pressure on its services continues to be overlooked by central government, which has prompted them to begin a claim for judicial review against Suella Braverman. And lastly, King Charles has been presented with the honours of Scotland today. At a service of Thanksgiving in Edinburgh, the King received the oldest crown jewels in Britain. That's a crown, a sceptre and a sword made of gold, silver and gems. And the day of pomp and pageantry concluded with a fly-past by the Red Arrows, emblazoning the sky with red, white and blue. The event saw several protests, however, with Police Scotland confirming 2 women were arrested after they allegedly tried to climb over crowd barriers. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and the TuneIn app. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Good evening, it's Mark Dolan in for the brilliant Dan Wootton. Lovely to have your company. The NHS is 75 today, and it's time to put the old dear out of her misery. We love the doctors, we love the nurses, but today is no celebration. Our National Health Service is a national health shambles. As we get sicker by the day, a devastating new study of 19 major health services by the respected King's Fund found that ours came second last on the all-important metric of saving lives. Only America's was worse. That's like being beaten by the Republic of Ireland in cricket. The NHS has some of the worst survival rates for cancer, heart attacks and strokes among advanced health systems. And we have the second lowest life expectancy among wealthy countries. And it's not about the money. The UK ranks 6th on the list for health expenditure as a percentage of GDP. The £180 billion a year that we now spend on health and social care is responsible for 40p of every pound we spend on public services. It's a broken business model that would have crooked banker Bernard Madoff blushing. People boast that the NHS is the largest employer in Europe. That's not a boast. That is a sign of its wild inefficiency. Don't forget, every penny wasted in the NHS is money that could be spent on our military to stand up to tyrants like Vladimir Putin, that could be spent on education to invest in our young people, and could be spent on policing to make our streets safer. It's time to take a long, sharp blade to the sacred cow of the NHS. It's my view that healthcare should be available to all, irrespective of income. That is my red line. But beyond that, nothing should be off the table in terms of reform. And it's pretty clear that private enterprise has a part to play. A view echoed by Labour's Tony Blair laying out his blueprint for a new NHS today. Businesses have targets. They know how to manage costs. They look at the bottom line. If a business isn't efficient or spends more than comes in, it goes bust. The NHS has been lacking that discipline since its inception. It's a money pit that will never be filled. But if we're going to talk about our health service, then the elephant in the room is public health itself. The NHS spends the lion's share of its resources managing illness rather than getting us better, with preventable lifestyle-related conditions like type 2 diabetes and obesity hoovering up the NHS's precious billions. The health service is now spending a fortune on knee replacements for 35-year-olds, unheard of a few decades ago. And many of the NHS's problems are not financial, but cultural. For example, the NHS is in the grip of the pharmaceutical industry. So whatever your problem, they don't ask about your lifestyle. Instead, they flick through their Rolodex, deciding which medication to prescribe next. There's a pill for everything. But as any rock star will tell you, the drugs don't work. America, for example, is the most medicated nation on earth and among the illest. The NHS is now institutionally woke, with dangerous unisex wards and leaflets referring to women as birthing humans and chest feeders. What an insult. And millions are spent on diversity officers for the most diverse employer on earth. Make it make sense. During the pandemic, it became the National COVID Service, chaining shut GP surgeries and cancelling treatments. The NHS backed those ruinous lockdowns, which have left us with a broken economy, a poorer, more divided society, a mental health tsunami, an NHS waiting list of 7 million people, and a generation of damaged kids. And they presided over vaccine tyranny, seeking to jab all and sundry, including those who patently didn't need it. And the deification of the institution itself leaves me cold. Whether it was the bashing of saucepans during COVID, this North Korean-style scene of a children's choir performing on BBC's Newsnight last week, or the Glastonbury Festival with their bizarre tribute to our health service. How ironic, it's probably easier to get tickets to Glastonbury than to see your GP this side of Christmas. I'm still waiting for that hip replacement, but at least I got to see Elton John. He's still standing. I'm not with this pain. And to make matters worse, belligerent health unions are threatening doctors' strikes until 2025. And with desperate Brits now borrowing money or using savings to pay for private treatment, the NHS is becoming like the BBC, something we've all got to pay for, but one which many don't even use. People often say the NHS is the envy of the world. Maybe 50 years ago, but not now. Like Madonna Ronnie Wood and the Wimpy burger chain, it's seen better days. The people are great, the service isn't. 75 years on, the NHS is broken beyond repair. It's enough to make you sick. To respond to that, my superstar panel, Conservative peer Baroness Foster, businessman and activist Adam Brooks, and former Labour Party advisor Matthew Lazar. Matthew, let me start with you. Our NHS is on life support. It's time to pull the plug.
It's not time to pull the plug, but it's certainly time for some serious surgery. And that's actually what we saw in the news Wes Streeting, Labour's health spokesperson, has been talking about today. I mean, there's a big danger, and I've said this to Wes and to other senior people, that if the NHS, that Labour gets stuck between public dissatisfaction and unhappy unions representing unhappy workers, and that would be a danger for Keir coming into government. But I don't think we're going to be moving to an insurance system anytime soon. But certainly, you know, the NHS has got to up its game. Up its game.
The Labour Party up its game. Well, look, the NHS needs to do that. The Labour Party, I think, is more left-wing now under Keir Starmer than it was under Tony Blair. Keir Starmer doesn't have a cat's in hell's chance of making the NHS more competitive, which is Blair's blueprint, isn't it?
No, because you just heard Wes talking about bringing in and using private sector capacity. I would say that we saw the NHS revolutionised under the last Labour government. We saw waiting lists come tumbling down. We saw nobody waiting more than 18 months, literally nobody across the country. Now we have tens of thousands. I think actually Labour will be radical in doing what's needed. But on the reverse of that is Wes and Keir will have to stand up and will have to make clear to those working in the NHS, most of whom do a brilliant job, but that the way they work... the way they work needs to get better, because there's been this terrible statistic that there's been a 27% decrease since COVID in NHS productivity compared to a 1% decrease across the economy. That's not sustainable. Those of us who want to see the NHS succeed and want to see it getting the cash it needs, it can't be a black hole.
But Labour will not stand up to the public sector. Labour won't be tough with the unions. They will yield to those inflation-busting demands, and they will not change the NHS because they will be ordered by their paymasters to keep the status quo.
No, we saw change under the last Labour government, and we'll see change under the next Labour government. What we've seen over the last 10 years is stop-start...
And when you say change, do you mean more socialism in the NHS?
No, I mean things like sorting social care out, which this government's had 13 years to do, hasn't done, and is a massive drain, causing huge problems and putting down productivity, for example.
Baroness Foster, your reaction to 75 years of the NHS?
Well, I thought your introduction actually covered a huge number of areas, and I have to say I agreed with all of it. I think it's a great shame.
Glad I invited you tonight.
I think it's a great shame because I recall, you know, going back when my parents, you know, the NHS was created. My mother, as a young girl, had had diphtheria, and then, of course, we were all vaccinated as time went on. But inevitably, when you look at the advances in technology, when you look at the increase in the population, and we were talking about comparisons, for example, with other countries. I mean, I've worked and lived in 3 or 4 other countries, and I think where we have an issue is there's this dogma that surrounds the NHS having to remain as the NHS, and everything that's private is a terrible thing. And while it's a political football, whatever the Labour Party may say or Wes Streeting, as soon as anybody who's a Conservative says something like, well, we need to look how we restructure it, immediately then the cry goes out, well, of course, you just want to privatise everything. Notwithstanding, as has been mentioned, I mean, the number of hips and knees that are actually done, the replacements are actually done in so many private hospitals, that's gone on for years. So there's not an issue with the Labour Party that happens. But I think as a general rule, what I think I've noticed is the problem is with the NHS, it's reactive. It's not proactive. And therefore, you quite rightly say, one of the biggest budgets that it actually has is when we're looking at the effects of obesity and half the population are overweight or more. And then the diseases that come from that, some of the cancers when you speak to the oncologists and others. I mean, a lot of this is preventable. And we appear to have GPs at times, that's if you can manage to see a GP, and then they're basically being told from the Quangos and NHS England, you know, you must be sensitive with people if they're overweight, don't make them feel embarrassed. But people need to know. Because the more you try and protect people, then they're living under a false sense of security.
Years and years ago, I was growing up, family friend needed a new liver, and the doctor said, you're not getting one until you stopped drinking.
Quite.
And that was the sort of responsibility I think we're lacking now. Adam Brooks, you're a top entrepreneur and an organiser of people. How would you fix the NHS?
Well, I think a lot of middle management needs to go. You know, as I watched some programmes today about the NHS, they have a meeting about a meeting and then someone has to write the notes up about the meeting and then send it to someone else to analyse the meeting notes. There's so much waste. I used to have a supplier that had two price lists. You know, one was for the NHS and one was for the general public. The NHS used to pay way over the odds.
Yeah.
And there was no one in the NHS checking this, or was they, and was they corrupt? I think there's a lot of corruption and a lot of waste. But am I missing something today? You know, is a 75th birthday a meaningful birthday? Is it some magical number? No, it's not. And I find it in bad taste that we're celebrating and worshipping an organisation that has 7.4 million people waiting on the waiting list, and 1 in 3 cannot access its services. I think it's very bad taste. I think the majority of NHS staff are wonderful people. They're there to help. But there's also some real nasty, bitter... I see it during COVID. A lot of the abuse that I would get on Twitter was from so-called NHS workers.
There is a sense of entitlement.
Right, they've got a sense of entitlement. If they've got that NHS badge, that they should have discounts, that they should have special treatment. No, get on with your job. That's what you chose to do. Okay. And most of you are special people. I've been treated in hospital, so has my relatives, and I appreciate that. But you're not above everyone else. You chose to do that.
Did you clap?
You know what? My nan was in hospital during the first few weeks of COVID, badly ill. And so I did clap. My kids wanted to clap because they'd been told to at school. So I went along with that. But after weeks, you know, I woke up and started pushing back. And I think the NHS has a lot to answer for becoming the National COVID Service, as you say.
OK, well, look, has the halo slipped for the National Health Service? Let me know your thoughts. Dan at gbnews.com. Still to come, after a leading petition website took down a desperate plea from 5 schoolgirls to ban unisex toilets. Are we putting our daughters in danger? Broadcaster and former teacher Tonya Buxton is fired up on this, and she joins me live soon. But next up in the clash, following a vocal anti-monarchist backlash to King Charles's Scottish coronation, is the new monarch strong enough to see off the growing Republican threat? One of the protesters in Edinburgh today, Riz Posnett, goes head-to-head with Niall Gardner. Let us know what you think. Email me, dan at gbnews.com, or tweet us at gbnews. There's a poll up as well. Do vote now.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan in for Dan Wootton this week and next. Lovely to have your company. Tonya Buxton and Paul Burrell on the way. But time now for The Clash. And the King arrived in Edinburgh for his Scottish coronation today, only to be met by a rabid anti-monarchist backlash. Look at these scenes from earlier on. Not my king. What a bunch of king idiots. Now, it must be said, this was a vocal minority who were challenged by a much larger group of spectators loyal to the royal family. But with Republican protests also breaking out before May's coronation, King Charles is suddenly under massive pressure to preserve the monarchy that he inherited in great shape from the late Queen under a year ago. So what do you think following a vocal anti-monarchist backlash at the Scottish coronation? Is the King strong enough to see off the growing Republican threat? Let me know your thoughts. Email me, dan@gbnews.com, or tweet me @gbnews. And whilst you're there, please vote in the poll. I'll bring you the results of that shortly, but to debate this now, I'm delighted to welcome anti-monarchy campaigner Riz Posnet, who is up in Edinburgh right now, and former aide to Margaret Thatcher, Niall Gardner. Riz Posnet, what's the problem with King Charles? He's doing a great job.
I mean, I can come to all of that, right? To be clear, our issue is not even specifically with King Charles, it's with the monarchy, the British monarchy as an institution. But just to clarify quickly first, you said vocal minority. That's just subjectively untrue. You can look up the pictures, videos yourself. There were barely any people on the street supporting the king. And a massive demo. In fact, multiple different demos at different points along the route. The fact of the matter is, it was an embarrassment today, and it would be purely funny if it weren't for the fact that it was paid for by the taxpayer in an economy where we just can't afford that.
However, Riz, don't you want a world-famous figure like King Charles representing the whole of the United Kingdom, including Scotland? After all, who's heard of these obscure presidents? Could you name me the president of Germany or the president of Ireland?
I mean, I'm not going to go into those specifics. That's kind of besides the point as far as I'm concerned.
Do you know what they're called? Do you know the name of the president of Germany?
Yeah.
Do you know the name of the president? Because that's the alternative to a monarchy, is some clapped-out politician in a suit.
So, yeah, absolutely, right? Charles is, well, I'm not sure infamous. I mean, in Britain, sure, people know who he is. People across the world knew who the Queen was, but that's besides the point. Like, we can talk about this specific person, but the reality is a monarchy in modern Britain is not justifiable. It's completely undemocratic. We can't afford it. And you'll say, oh, they bring in this much money, but they don't. The estates do, and we should open those to the public and ticket them, right? Like, the facts are there. You can go and look them up. It costs us so much money. We can't afford it. And besides all of that, it's completely undemocratic in the first place. We should have an elected head of state who can represent the interests of British people, because Charles has shown that he can't do that. We've seen him intervene in politics consistently, even before he became king, just for his pet projects, anything from like the medicine with needles, whatever it's called, to like environmental stuff. And that's not like wide-scale climate change. That's just like pet projects. He's not a good political figure, and it's completely inaccurate to say that he has no influence over politics. We could do so much better with an elected head of state who is representing British people both domestically and on a global stage. And we shouldn't be proud of him. He's embarrassing.
Riz, be careful what you wish for. I'm surprised you don't like Charles. He's the most woke monarch we've ever had, particularly in relation to his obsession with net zero. Get rid of him at your peril. Niall Gardner, the case for a king.
Thanks very much for having me on the show today, Mark. And I have to say, if that's the level of anti-monarchy sentiment out there that we've just heard, I think the future of the monarchy is extremely safe, actually. After all, the British people overwhelmingly support the British monarchy. The British people are proud of the monarchy. King Charles, I see, already has an approval rating, according to YouGov, of over 60%. Prince William has an approval rating of 75%. And you look at this small demonstration of rather foul-mouthed individuals on the streets of Edinburgh, you compare that with the overwhelming public support for the king, for the monarchy, there's a huge difference. And I do think that the king represents Great Britain very well on the world stage. The British people are proud to have a monarchy. The British monarchy is widely admired across the world. And I think the king and also, of course, Prince William are outstanding representatives for the monarchy. They follow in the footsteps of the Queen. And I do think that Great Britain's prestige, its image on the world stage is greatly enhanced, actually, by the monarchy and by the royal family. And we should be proud of the royal family, proud of the monarchy, what it stands for. And if you look at those who oppose the monarchy, I have to say, a very small minority of the population, really. And you look at what they're saying, a lot of it's just completely incomprehensible, driven by outright hatred, rudeness, vulgarity that we saw today on the streets of Edinburgh. You compare that with the tremendous, I think, heart of service that you see from the royal family, exemplified, I think, especially by Prince William, next in line for the throne. And you look at the heart of service for the British people, for the British nation, and you compare and contrast that with the kind of, I would say, outright nastiness and unpleasantness of some of those who represent the anti-monarchy movement. I think there's a very stark contrast between the two.
Riz Posner, by the way, fair play to you for joining us on the show to argue your corner. I love Scotland, lived there for 4 years in Edinburgh, university up there. What a city, what a country. We love Scotland. I've got so many viewers up in Scotland and listeners. And I think that Scotland is particularly lucky to have King Charles, because the last thing you want is that prize numpty, the new First Minister, Mr. Hamza Yousaf, representing Scotland abroad. You want somebody like the King, a world-famous statesman.
So, okay, sorry, there's so much to come back on there. First of all, British pride in the king. Sorry, I think that's completely embarrassing. We've got better sources of pride, and I personally think that an institution built on imperialism, racism, exploitation is not our main source of pride.
Riz, where do you get racism from?
Wrap up some of these points?
What's racist about King Charles?
We know the history of the British monarchy. We know exactly where their power and their strength came from in the past, right? That is...
So it's not King Charles's fault.
Objectively speaking, the history of the monarchy. So for me, that institution of monarchy is not a good source of pride, and there are so many people in modern Britain who can't detach that history because they still suffer the consequences of it. We could have pride in modern Britain, right? We could have pride.
Don't you want the great people of Scotland to be properly represented abroad? Okay, if you've got the King, who travels, for example, to Paris. He's going to the Élysée Palace. If King Charles goes to America, he will stay at the White House. If it was a president, they'd be at a Holiday Inn Express. The point is that our king brings soft diplomatic power, recognition, and is a huge, huge selling point for this country as a brand.
So that's what I was getting at before you cut me off. Objectively untrue, right? People will say like, oh, everyone watched the coronation, everyone loves the pomp and pageantry.
They did.
People abroad, hang on, think it's funny. We're pathetic on the global stage. Britain is in massive decline, and the solution to being significant to providing solutions in the future is not going back to the past and like rehearsing the same old rubbish. By the way, Charles does not do a good job of representing us. Like,
Niall, briefly, if you can, Niall.
Respond to the utterly ignorant nonsense that we've just heard, actually. Just staggering levels of stupidity here being put forward. Great Britain is hugely respected on the world stage. The monarchy is hugely respected. This idea that Britain is in decline is complete and utter nonsense. This idea that Britain is a racist country or the monarchy is racist, complete and utter lies, disinformation here.
Have you read a history book ever? Did you study history just out of interest? Just a quick one.
The anti-British statements that we just heard are absolutely appalling and should be condemned.
I'm not anti-British. I'm proud of my community that I organise with. I think British people are withstanding so many struggles.
Riz, please allow Niall to finish, and I'll get you to have the last word. Niall, final thoughts, please.
Yeah, final thoughts here. The monarchy is a great institution. It's been in place for over 1,000 years. We should be proud of what the monarchy represents. We should be proud of Great Britain and what Great Britain represents. This nation has done so much for the sake of the world. It has fought against tyranny. It has fought against racism. It outlawed and defeated, of course, slavery. We have so much to be proud of with regard to Britain's history, its past. The monarchy is a huge part of that here. And Great Britain is a nation, of course, that stands tall on the world stage today because of its great history.
Riz Posnett, it's time to love Britain. The best way to do that is to love King Charles.
Totally untrue. I'm proud of Britain. I think there is a fantastic future for Britain if we can kick out these parasites and create a better democratic system.
That's a very rude thing to say. Riz, that's very rude to describe the royal family, who are human beings, as parasites. That's inflammatory language and deeply offensive.
People constantly describe people
my
living on
viewers and
benefits
listeners
as
will be very
parasites.
upset by what you just said. Will you please apologise for calling King Charles and his family parasites? That's inhuman language.
Sorry,
you take that
back. That's language that's constantly used towards people who are living on benefits, who don't live in palaces on taxpayer money. No, absolutely not.
You should be apologising for your outrageous statements. Very rude.
It's one of the most shocking things I've heard. Can I say thank you? A lively debate, as predicted. Riz Posnett, thank you for joining us. Do join us again soon. And Niall Gardner, former aide to Margaret Thatcher. And Riz Posnett is an anti-monarchy campaigner who feels that Charles is not her king. Do give your reaction, Dan, at gbnews.com. Is the king strong enough to see off the growing Republican threat? On Twitter, Parble says, yes, it was a tiny minority, not representative of what Scots actually think or want. They are mainly Greens and Nats. They'll be gone soon. Matthew on Twitter, Charles isn't strong enough, sadly. William and Catherine, however. Darcy on Twitter, to say the monarchy died with HM Queen Elizabeth II. Oh, sorry, to me, forgive that. That's just Darcy said, to me, the monarchy died with Elizabeth. A very sad sentiment, but there may be an element of truth to that. Keep those opinions coming. Your verdict is in. 70% of you agree that King Charles is strong enough to see off the growing Republican threat. 30% say he is not. Coming up after sparking huge controversy online, including from lefty lovies like David Baddiel and Richard Bacon, English football legend and dropper of truth bombs Matt Le Tissier defends his tweet that Britain is on the brink of a communist-style takeover. Also, this is deeply troubling. After 5 schoolgirls set out to ban unisex toilets, but their online petition gets taken down, is the safety of students being sacrificed at the altar of extreme gender ideology? Broadcaster and campaigner Tonya Buxton makes a plea to remove our daughters from danger. Are you worried about your daughters and your sisters and your aunties and your grannies? Well, I've got their back. We'll discuss that next.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in their home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan in for Dan Wootton this week and next. Great to see you. Thank you for joining us. Now, 5 teenage girls have had their desperate plea for single-sex toilets in schools taken down by the petition website change.org. The students were protesting the downright dangerous rollout of mixed-gender toilets across the country after 3 schoolgirls in Essex were sexually assaulted in gender-neutral facilities last week. And the campaign gained thousands of signatures and widespread support before it was incredibly shut down by change.org, with critics accusing the platform of caving into pressure from the extreme trans lobby. Well, I'm delighted now to be joined by broadcaster, campaigner and former teacher Tonya Buxton. Tonya, great to see you.
Good evening.
Are our daughters in danger?
Yes.
Why?
Because these mixed-sex toilets are causing them such issues. Just take away any kind of... Take away the boys that are abusing girls. Just take young teenage boys. Just that as an example alone, firstly, before we go into the more sinister
They're hormonal,
They're hormonal, they're silly, mainly. You know, I've had girls come up to me and tell me stories about how they don't want to go to the loos if they're on their periods. It's an uncomfortable thing. Girls, their bodies are changing. There's so much going on. The last thing they want to do is go to the loo and have to change a sanitary towel and have some boy rattling the door outside. Boys putting cameras and clicking pictures because, you know, loos in schools they have gaps at the top, gaps at the bottom. This is what goes on. But even those that aren't sinister, that aren't abusing girls, they're joking around with their mates, they're jumping up, they're humiliating the girls. It's completely wrong.
And even if they're not relating to the girls directly, it's the proximity of male voices in that sort of intimate setting which is a problem, isn't it? Because a friend of mine was in a high street shop and she was trying on clothes. Now, she had her own cubicle in a unisex changing room, but she's trying on a dress which involves being in her underwear, and she is hearing these deep male voices next door to her. Already she feels scared and threatened. And this must be 10 times worse if we're talking about 14-year-old girls.
It's so much worse. And the fact that these young girls wrote a letter to Rishi Sunak, literally, very calmly, plotting out why they don't want single-sex toilets. One of the main things is English schools now don't even have enough toilets in the schools anymore because the population has grown. There's not enough toilets as it is. So making these mixed-sex toilets is making it very difficult. 50% of the students are girls and they want some privacy. They're going through hormonal changes, they're feeling uncomfortable with their bodies, and there are some really predatory teenagers.
Of course.
Teenage boys are known to be... They have no sympathy. All they want to do is empathy, and also they just want to cop a glance, and so they're looking at every way they can.
And they're aggressive, and some of them will be attackers, which happened in Essex. I can't believe we're having this conversation. The world has clearly gone mad. Do you think that... I mean, by the way, your reaction to this tech company, Change.org...
is absolutely disgusting.
They've taken it down.
But the worst of it is they took it down. I mean, we know these tech companies are behaving very badly.
Are these idiots in California as well, Change.org?
Probably. But my biggest thing is that Stonewall, which... The old Stonewall that gave gay people their rights, and we were all part of that. I mean, we all joined that.
But now they've jumped gay rights, haven't they?
Well, no, what's happened with gay rights is that we got what we wanted. You know, well done. The right thing happened in people can marry each other, they get the same work, and, you know, there is no issue with gay people anymore. And so Stonewall, in order to keep going, had to come up with something else. And they have come up with this trans ideology, which is completely wrong. There is no place for this ideology in schools.
And this isn't about welcoming trans people.
No, it's got nothing. It's got nothing to do.
What would you say, though, to perhaps a trans teenager, age 14? They feel they're in the wrong body, and a unisex toilet is a good solution for them to feel included. What about their feelings?
OK, so what are we talking about? It's a 0.0001%
don't they matter?
of population. They absolutely do matter, and I think and I think the staff should then allow them to use the staff toilets so they can go in there and use that toilet, and that should be fine for them. It should not be affecting the females. It should not be affecting the young girls. Girls and women need safe spaces within school. It's really important that they have somewhere that they can feel safe in, that they can go and just get away from the boys in school.
And can you tell me about girls apparently not going to the loo all day at school? Tell me about this.
I've had some horrific
Surely
cases.
This is made up.
And it's not made up at all. And
what goes on?
Alison Pearson had a great piece today in the Telegraph as well, so she's a real champion of female spaces.
So what goes on? Give me an example.
So, for example, there are girls getting urinary tract infections because they're refusing to go to the toilet at school. They're literally holding their wee all day.
What does that do for their studies and their ability to concentrate?
Forget about studying ability to concentrate. It's making them sick. It's making them sick. And other girls who refuse to go and they don't want to go to the toilets to change their sanitary towels are using super big pads and feeling very uncomfortable and horrible all day long just because they don't want to go into the mixed-sex toilets. This has to stop. It's wrong and it's immoral and it must stop.
There you go, 3 words for you. Welcome to hell. My thanks to the amazing Tonya Buxton, who I've got to say is an absolute star and a regular here on GB News. We'll catch up soon. Coming up, with plunging poll ratings and accusations he's completely given up, should Rishi Sunak call Labour's bluff and hold a snap general election? That's our big debate in the media buzz. But next, after Nigel Farage speaks out about his political persecution by the UK's banks, is Britain in the grip of a communist-style takeover? That's the view of England football legend Matt Le Tissier, and he's next.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point.
And action.
Sergeant Reed, my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Football legend Matt Le Tissier is tonight's outsider. The banking scandal, originally sparked by Nigel Farage, has now unravelled a flurry of other cases where people accused of wrongthink have disturbingly seen their accounts closed. A gender-critical vicar revealed he was debanked, a brand new disgusting verb that we've learnt this week, by Yorkshire Building Society. That happened last month, whilst women's rights campaigners yesterday said they had the rug pulled beneath them by RBS. Women's rights campaigners, folks. So with dissident voices seemingly being punished by authoritarian corporations and the nation still suffering the hangover of Chinese-style pandemic lockdowns, is Britain in the grip of a communist-style takeover? Well, that's what England idol Matt Le Tissier thinks, with the former Southampton hero tweeting, "The time to speak is now. A communist takeover is slyly being implemented. They're very clever, but they don't fool everyone. Good will triumph over evil." What a tweet! Well, Le Tiss was mocked for his analysis by the likes of woke lefty comic David Baddiel and BBC lovey Richard Bacon, but was unwavering in his face of such criticism. He joins us now. Matt Le Tissier, great to have you on the show. Wonderful to meet your heroes at last. The lockdowns, vaccine mandates, cashless society, universal basic income. It's not a conspiracy at all, is it? It's a reality.
I'm afraid it is a reality. And, you can call it communism, Marxism, whatever label you want to give it. But it's all heading towards the same thing. And that's the erosion of our freedoms as people. And I find it incredibly concerning. the way that this country is going. And they're doing it very, very slowly, although they seem to be cranking things up a little bit over the last few months. And a lot of people don't realise what's going on. And, by me trying to point that out and to try and get people to think about this stuff, it appears, that's the cue for all the people who are probably in favour of communism, actually, who decided to try and attack me because I had the temerity to speak out against their ideologies. And as long as I'm annoying all the right kind of people, then I'm quite happy to keep tweeting. Don't worry about that.
Yes, I mean, some, Matt, would argue that use of the word communism is a bit far-fetched. What would you say to that?
I think you've only got to look at what's happened to people who go against the government narrative, having bank accounts frozen, political opponents being attacked. I think the stuff that is going on right now, I don't think is too different to what has happened in communist countries in the past. And so, you can, as I said, you call it whatever name you want. But we are gradually having our freedoms taken away from us, and they are doing. And if you haven't read the story of or know about boiling the ethical frog, then I suggest you read up on it, because that's exactly what they seem to be doing to us.
Are you surprised, Matt, that people in the world of football have not spoken out?
Am I surprised? There have been a few, in all fairness. There have been some, and I've had quite a lot of people come up to me in person. In fact, I had 3 people come up to me just this morning at a golf day that I was playing in. 3 ex-footballers who all came up and congratulated me and said, well done for speaking out, don't stop. We agree with everything that you're saying. Those guys didn't have a massive presence on social media, but it was nice to have their support. And there are a lot of people that think that. Over the last few years, I've had a lot of messages from people who have said in private to me, we agree with everything you say, but unfortunately we can't speak out because, I need a job to pay the bills.
Can you name any of those people, Matt?
I think that would be incredibly disingenuous of me to name those people. I think it would be pretty unfair on them, because that would just hang them out to dry, and that's not the kind of person that I am. I would not do that to those people. And it's, it's just a fact of life, that these people are frightened for their futures, and they don't want to jeopardise that, so they won't speak out. I've taken the decision that I feel that it's too important not to speak out, and if that means that I earn a lot less money now than I did 3 years ago, then so be it. I will just cut my cloth accordingly and still keep speaking out because I feel like it's the right thing to do.
Listen, Matt, I'm a huge fan of yours, and I'm fascinated by what you have to say on Twitter. I think you're incredibly courageous. I think you're a hero all over again, once on the pitch and now in the public sphere. There are those that would say that when you talk about this kind of communist-style takeover, the idea of cultural Marxism and the woke stuff, or even world government and a plan for world government, no property, that kind of thing, some people would say you've lost the plot. How would you respond to that?
I would say to those people, it might have been a good idea for you to go and look on the World Economic Forum website 3 years ago and see what their plans were. There's plenty of speeches that you can view where a lot of world leaders have spoken about a new world order and a one world government, all that kind of stuff. So there's plenty of stuff out there if you want to go and look for it. If you can't be bothered to go and look for it, if you can't be bothered to educate yourselves, then I suggest you don't have a go at me. I think it's quite strange that people are willing to kind of have a go at you if they haven't decided to go and have a look at things for themselves. I've had a look at it. I've come to my own conclusions. All I ask is for people to go and have a look at it. They might come to different conclusions to me, and hey, that's absolutely fine. But don't be ignorant. At least go out and educate yourselves into what the possibility is maybe happening in the years in front of us, and that's all I'd say to them.
Matt, I've only got a couple of seconds. And some would say, you know, New World Order, you're going to own nothing, you'll be happy. It's all bunkum, but it is all about opinions. Yours are worth hearing. In the last few seconds, how do you see this playing out? In your tweet, you said good will prevail. Will it?
Yeah, I 100% believe it will. I believe there are way more good people on this planet than there is evil, and it's only a matter of time before we come together and we defeat what is in front of us. I have no doubt whatsoever that there are so many people in this planet, and too many people go, well, what can I do? I don't have a big platform. What can I do? But there are lots of things that you can do. Do not comply is the first one to ridiculous diktats from tyrannical governments. That's the first thing you can do. And make sure you keep using cash, because that's pretty important going forward.
Matt, what a star you are. Great to have you on the show. Fascinating conversation. Catch up soon. England and Premier League legend Matt Le Tissier. Coming up, has Meghan Markle had enough of working with her husband, the Duke of Sussex? The late Princess Diana's former butler, Paul Burrell, joins me to reveal all. Plus, is their marriage on the rocks? But next in the media buzz, with plunging poll ratings and accusations he's given up, should Rishi Sunak call Labour's bluff and hold a snap general election? My superstar panel will debate that. We'll see you in 2 minutes. Plus, by the way, tomorrow's front pages. A busy hour to come. Don't go anywhere.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive, because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
It's 10 o'clock. I'm Mark Dolan, standing in for Dan Wootton. Tonight, Rishi Sunak was AWOL from Prime Minister's questions again today, leaving him open to digs like this.
I think I'm right in saying that I have the pleasure again next week. 2 weeks on the trot. They really have given up.
But with the Tories seemingly at an all-time low and with nothing to lose, should the Prime Minister call Labour's bluff and hold a snap general election? That is the big debate with my superstar panel next. Tonight, I'm joined by Baroness Jacqueline Foster, Adam Brooks and Matthew Larzer. Also tonight, after her Spotify humiliation, Meghan Markle's team have reportedly warned her there's no future for brand Sussex and she needs to start working on her individual projects. Could there be trouble brewing in Montecito? Princess Diana's former butler and her rock, Paul Burrell, gives his exclusive insight shortly. Plus, is the royal marriage on the rocks? And the lovey of the left, Carol Vorderman, may have met her match after she was slammed by the wife of Conservative Minister Johnny Mercer.
Wait, I don't know what it is. She just drives me up the
school.
Bring it on. So are woke celebrities like Vorders and Gary Lineker inciting hatred against Conservative supporters. We'll discuss that in the media buzz. Plus, so excited about this, GB News star Nana Akua speaks out on the hugely controversial production at an East London theatre that banned all white people from attending. She's uncancelled later this hour. You'll also get a first look at tomorrow's papers as they drop, and I'll have all the power tonight, so find out who I crown Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. But before all of that, with a busy hour to come, we've got the headlines and Polly Middlehurst.
Thank you. Well, our top story tonight on GB News is that a record waiting list has cast a shadow over the NHS's 75th anniversary. But political leaders, along with members of the royal family, paid tribute today to staff working within the NHS at a ceremony at Westminster Abbey in London. But it comes as Labour warned the NHS will die out without further investment or modernisation. 7.4 million people are currently on NHS waiting lists, with the government acknowledging that number could get worse before it gets better. The Shadow Health Secretary says the NHS is in fact facing the worst crisis in its history.
Deeply angry about the two-tier system we have in our country today, where those who can afford it are paying to go private and those who can't afford it are being left behind. And my answer would be, in the short term, where there is spare capacity in the private sector, we should be paying for it on NHS terms so that people who can't afford it are getting it free at the point of use. That would be my answer. I've got no objection to using private sector capacity to get NHS waiting lists down faster.
Wes Streeting talking there. Well, the Wimbledon Tennis Championship was disrupted by Just Stop Oil demonstrations twice this afternoon. One protester was arrested on suspicion of aggravated trespass and criminal damage after orange confetti was strewn across Court 18. And that comes after two other activists were detained for targeting the same court. The group says it took action because of the tournament's sponsorship deal with Barclays Bank, which has given £30 billion, it says, to oil and gas companies over the last 2 years. There's anger over plans which would see the closure of almost every railway station ticket office in England. The proposal, unveiled by the Rail Delivery Group, affects hundreds of stations, with facilities only expected to remain open at the busiest stations. Disability charities and unions are among those who voiced their concerns, saying it'll impact vulnerable people and lead to job losses. The decision about which offices will be closed will be made after a consultation process. A council is launching legal action against the Home Secretary over the number of migrant children arriving on its shores. Kent County Council says it's under a wholly disproportionate strain due to hundreds of unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. Despite a national scheme to distribute migrants across counties, the location of Dover's port means that Kent is affected more than others. Council bosses say the pressure on its services continues to be overlooked by central government, which has prompted them to begin a claim for a judicial review against Suella Braverman. And today, King Charles has been presented with the Honours of Scotland at a service of Thanksgiving in Edinburgh. His Majesty received the oldest crown jewels in Britain. That's a crown, a sceptre and a sword made of gold, silver and precious gems. And the day of pomp and pageantry concluded with a fly past by the Red Arrows, the sky emblazoned with red, white and blue as they flew over Edinburgh. Well, the event did see some protests, with Police Scotland confirming 2 women were arrested after they allegedly tried to climb over a barrier. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and the TuneIn app. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Tomorrow's news tonight in our media buzz. Let's kick off with the very first look at the front pages, hot off the press. And we start with Metro. Help save our little Hallie. Parents fight to raise £1 million for pioneering op to beat baby's cancer after transplant failed. Also, Slash, the legendary rock guitarist, is 60. Daily Star, Old Man Gets a New Hat Part 2, reflecting the King's coronation in Scotland. And Crossbow Raider held inside Windsor Castle. AI chatbot wanted me to kill the Queen. Computer pal impressed by murder bid. Man arrested with a loaded crossbow inside Windsor Castle had been egged on by a piece of software called an AI chatbot who told him his bid to assassinate the Queen was wise, a court has heard. What a chilling story. There's a couple of front pages. More to come, but now it's my superstar panel. Conservative peer, Baroness Foster, businessman and activist Adam Brooks, and former Labour Party advisor Matthew Larter. Now, he looked glum as a dishwater, frankly, when being grilled by MPs in Parliament yesterday. And with new data showing Rishi Sunak's popularity has plunged to an all-time low, it's easy to understand why. The Conservative Home website's monthly poll of Tory activists found that for the first time since he moved into Downing Street, the PM now has a negative approval rating. In a separate poll by Redfield and Wootton Strategies, he's especially turning off voters in the so-called blue wall, 42 seats in the south of England that have traditionally always voted Conservative. Tories in the Shires gave him a dismal approval rating of -8. Meanwhile, Sunak is being accused by some quarters of practically giving up as Prime Minister after dodging PMQs for the second week running.
Mr Speaker, I'm glad to see the right honourable gentleman here today. I think I'm right in saying that I have the pleasure again next week, 2 weeks on the trot. They really have given up. Every day.
So with Rishi looking down and out and Labour already running victory laps, should the embattled PM come out swinging, call Keir Starmer's bluff and sensationally call a snap election? Baroness Foster.
Well, absolutely not. We've got an election coming up in 18 months in any event. There's no reason to do that. You're quite right to say things have been pretty difficult. And what we need, frankly, is he has settled certain things down. Things were very up in the air with all these various leaders we had over the last 12 months. But what we need is to get back to what we're all about. I am a small state, low-tax Thatcherite. And that is what Conservatives
Probably
are.
better change party then.
Well, what you have to do is you have to work on the inside. And it's very easy on the outside when you think you can do all sorts of things without the responsibility. And I would like to see the Chancellor, and I'm repeating myself, start looking at our support. That's the middle earners. There are thousands more have crept into 40% top tax rate. We are not going to cure inflation by keeping corporation tax high, by taxing everybody to the hilt. That is not the only instrument to use to deal with that. And the sooner they see that, the better. The entire supply chain, when you're looking at small and medium-sized businesses, they are more than 80% of the engine of this economy, and they need to be looked after. There are levels of VAT that they're having to pay. So there are things that you can do without being particularly drastic.
But at the moment, Sunak looks like a hostage to fortune, and I think the Tories trying to sort of essentially run down this Parliament to the latest possible moment makes them look weak. If he went to the country, like in the next couple of months, it would be decisive that he's owning the initiative again.
Well, no, you don't need to do that. We've got some by-elections coming up in any event. We know that. And I think 6 months or so is not going to make that much difference. And I think he's got to have a shot. He knows what we need. I mean, you know, whether it's the red wall seats or the blue wall seats, we know, most of us know what we need to do, what we have to have, what Rishi has to find within himself or those around him. A leader is fine, and a leader manages various things, but we have to have a leader with vision. And if the public can see that there is a vision, if the public can see that there is a plan, even if you can't carry out specifically every detail of that plan, but they know where you need to be, as we are Tories, then they will often give you the benefit of the doubt, perhaps, and they may come back to where they really want to be.
Matthew, you'd probably argue you'd love a snap election, perhaps in October, but I think if it happened, my viewers and listeners would start to think, well, wait a minute, this is the possibility of a Starmer government, I'm not so sure.
Well, it wouldn't be a case of calling Labour Party's bluff. It would be a case of putting the country out of its misery. I mean, as we saw in the local elections in May, across the whole of the country, crying out for change. We've had 13 years of failed Tory government. I've lost.
But does anyone want Starmer to be Prime Minister?
Absolutely.
Have you ever met a Keir Starmer fan?
Yes, I have, actually.
The lesser-spotted Keir Starmer fan.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I'm not...
Care to name and shame?
Too many to mention. I wouldn't want to bore you. But look, Keir isn't, even his closest friend says that he's not Mr. Excitement, he's not Mr. Showbiz, he's not a Labour version of Boris. That's not what the country
needs. He's not honest, he's slippery, he's duplicitous.
He's not duplicitous at all. He's not a...
He campaigned for Jeremy Corbyn to be Prime Minister. He tried to reverse Brexit.
Yeah.
And he can't define a woman.
Well, look, hang on, there's a lot to unpack there. What is absolutely clear is that the country is rejecting the Tories. At the moment, look at the best Prime Minister ratings, and Keir remains firmly ahead. And as you say, it won't just be Labour that wins seats. The Lib Dems will take seats off the Tories in the so-called blue wall as well. The whole country is crying out for change. Let's get the election done. Look, Tory MPs are putting in their papers, some literally, like Boris himself, who are facing up to what's happening and are taking the high road now. A score of others are saying they're not going to stand at the next election. They're falling apart. The country deserves better. We've got a cost of living crisis. We've got the worst economic performance in the industrial world. We need a fresh start.
I just wonder...
No policies, by the way.
We've got lots of policies.
I mean, to be fair, Matthew could argue that Labour couldn't do a worse job than the Tories over the last 13 years, and that would be reasonable. The economy's in the doghouse, all the rest of it. But, Adam Brooks, I just wonder whether the public, when confronted with the idea, the nightmare scenario of Prime Minister Keir Starmer, propped up possibly by the SNP and Corbynite, hard-left Corbynite MPs, I wonder that the public might actually sort of think twice and actually give Sunak another go.
You know what Sunak's problem is? Someone like me that was a Conservative voter in 2019, that I won't be voting. Now, I can't give my vote to Rishi Sunak. He's a glorified school prefect that talks down to people like me, doesn't understand small business, only cares about big business. The Conservative Party hit the self-destruct button when they got rid of Boris. It's fine saying, oh, the media and the left wing and whatever and the pressure. They hit the self-destruct button.
Well, Rishi hit it exactly a year ago.
Right, so Rishi hit the self-destruct button and they replaced Boris Johnson with a figure that the MPs didn't want, that the members didn't want and the public didn't want, who we cannot engage with, cannot connect with. And he's overseeing now a lot of the problems that we have are problems that are down to his policies during COVID and the money flooding into the system. We spoke backstage.
We did.
My businesses needed the COVID help. I was in one of the worst industries, hospitality, but I have friends that had businesses that received money when they didn't even need it. Then you've got the fraud. So Rishi isn't some sort of innocent figure here that is just sitting on, a bit of bad luck. Okay. The Conservatives did this to themselves.
He's getting ready to go back to Malibu.
Right. Does that mean you want Labour, though?
No.
Because I think the Tories' campaign should be the following, right? Basically, 4 words. At least we're not Labour.
But I can't give the party... Lucky I'm not Chancellor. Mark, I cannot give a party my vote simply because I believe Labour will be worse. At the end of the day, if they call a snap election now or in 6 months, they're getting annihilated. Okay. And we will have a Labour government for the next 15 years. That is the stark reality.
It's not a matter of if, it's when. Whenever it happens.
They are finished.
You've put a smile on Matthew's face for the first time this particular show. Listen, it's great to have your company. It's Mark Dolan in for Dan Wootton for This Week and Next. Thank you for joining us. Coming up, as the wife of Veterans Minister Johnny Mercer slams Carol Vorderman and other celebrity attack dogs for their incessant Tory bashing, are hypocritical lefties needlessly dividing Britain? My superstar panel have plenty to say on Carol, plus more of tomorrow's front pages. See you soon. And next, with Meghan Markle, rumoured to be tired of being one half Team Sussex, is the Duchess considering going it alone? Diana's former butler and close personal friend Paul Burrell is live in 2 minutes. Don't go anywhere.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides
the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in their home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan in for Dan Wootton this week and next. Lovely to have your company. Nana Akua, the Queen of GB News, on the way. A shocking story. Black-only theatre performance. Is that progress? And that's in Uncancelled. But it's time now for the late Princess Diana's former butler and rock, Paul Burrell. And according to a royal insider, Meghan Markle was, quote, knocked sideways and received a brutal reality check after she was dumped and labelled a grifter by the streaming giant Spotify. And speaking to Closer magazine about how she'll respond to the PR crisis, the insider said her team have warned her that there's no future with Harry and that she needs to start working on her individual projects rather than be being seen as one half of brand Sussex. They feel that if Meghan does more on her own, she'll have more opportunities to save her career. This follows reports that Harry could go it alone to film a Netflix documentary in Africa, the continent where he and Meghan famously shared their 3rd date. Paul Burrell, great to have you on the show. With both individuals pursuing solo projects, there's clearly trouble in paradise.
Well, Mark, quite frankly, the bosses of Netflix and Spotify have given them a reality check because not everybody is interested in Harry and Meghan. And it's becoming quite clear now that their brand is suffering and they need to rebrand and survive. Meghan is a survivor, and she's a very calculating woman, and she's a networker. So what will she do next? I think, personally, that it's her turn. Harry has done his book. He's been to the coronation, and he's been seen across the world as a court case. It's now Meghan's turn to get into the pole position. So she has to utilize the knowledge that she has in the film and entertainment industry by being an actress in Suits, and go into movies and the fashion and beauty industry, I think. But it's a sad truth that they had the world at their feet 5 years ago, and now it seems to be slipping away from them. I personally think that they should get off their backsides and do something for other people instead of always doing things for themselves. Look at Kate and William. They are doing their public duty brilliantly, and if only they could be a shadow of Kate and William and go back to Africa and help people who have nothing, then I think they would gain some respect in the world. But quite frankly, right now, people aren't particularly bothered. And it's Meghan's way and Harry's way, and it's their truth that matters most. And I think, it's time to reassess the situation.
Meghan Markle has a long history of dumping people who have served their purpose. Her ex-husband, her first husband, Piers Morgan, Lizzie Cundy, even her own father, Thomas Markle. Do you think eventually she'll do that to old Harry?
Well, do you know what, Mark? My belief is that this is all going to end in tears. I do believe that eventually Harry will have served his purpose and Meghan will move on, because she has before, and she'll probably move on to a billionaire next time round who can support her in the lifestyle to which she's accustomed already. She already has 2 children who are prince and princess, so Harry should look very closely at this and think, well, what's going to happen to me next? I honestly think that the British people would welcome Harry back, and certainly his brother would, and that would actually solve the situation and the rift which has grown between Harry and William. But if Harry comes back to Britain, he'll certainly be coming alone, because I don't think that the British people are ready to welcome Meghan back.
How long do you give the couple?
I always thought about 10 years. And I think it's a sad indictment that we're all saying, oh, that's not going to last. But that's just, it's only Harry that doesn't know this. Everybody else realizes that this is going to end in tears, but Harry's the last person that's actually going to know this. And the sadness is, of course, he'll have to leave his children behind because they'll stay with their mother. But there will always be a place in William's heart for his brother. Their mother would be devastated to think there was such a rift growing between those 2 boys, because those 2 boys were joined at the hip. And I don't want to see Harry with his heart broken again, but I do think it's inevitable.
Now, Paul, on this very show, the Mail on Sunday's editor-at-large, Charlotte Griffiths, gave a bombshell revelation about Prince William during the time of Harry and Meghan's infamous Oprah interview. Take a look.
The lead up to that Oprah interview, William was quite literally sick with worry. He was not eating. He became kind of not reclusive, but he definitely was hiding away. He'd gone to a royal residence for a period of time to just cut himself off from the world. And he was just in bits, basically.
Of course, since then, William and Harry have been at war, and Jenny Bond, a former royal correspondent who met Princess Diana many times before her death, has said Diana would be the only person who could fix the rift between her sons. Paul, it's terrible to hear those anecdotes about what William has been through, reduced to tears, in bits. Are you surprised by just how painful it's been for William, a young man that you know so well?
No, I'm not, because those 2 boys were very, very close, inseparable at one stage, and along came Meghan, and then it changed. Jenny's quite right. Jenny did meet the princess on several occasions, and Jenny's right in saying that it's only Diana that could have actually pulled them back together again. I think this relationship, I think the boys themselves, their relationship is irreparable. I don't think it's going to be mended anytime soon, because there's been far too much hurt. And Harry has thrown his entire family under the bus. He's thrown grenades into the heart of the House of Windsor, and they don't want to forgive him because he's caused a lot of distress to his brother, to his father, to his sister-in-law. And if they invite Harry and Meghan back into their fold, it'll only give them more stories to write about and to tell in America. Because let's just get down to the nitty-gritty, because Meghan and Harry, their biggest USP is being royal. And unless they have royal news to spread, what else have they got?
Oh dear, we lost Paul Burrell. Paul, thank you so much for joining us, Princess Diana's former butler. Coming up next, actually later this hour in Uncancelled, with woke theatres running controversial black audience-only performances and whacking Nazi trigger warnings on The Sound of Music, are the arts in Britain being ruined by the extreme left? GB News star Nana Akua gives her damning verdict later this hour. But next in the media buzz, with the wife of Veterans Minister Johnny Mercer furious at Carol Vorderman and other celebrity attack dogs for spreading hate against their political adversaries. Are hypocritical lefties corroding our political landscape? My superstar panel tackle this, plus more of tomorrow's Front Pages next.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not
believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point.
And action.
Sergeant Reed, my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan in for the brilliant Dan Wootton this week and next. Lovely to have your company. I'll be doing my show as well this Friday, Saturday and Sunday. It's a 12-night extravaganza. Strap yourselves in. Now let's return to tomorrow's news tonight in our media buzz. More front pages have arrived. Let's start with the newspaper. 7% mortgages forecast this summer as big lenders hike UK rates again. Halifax and Santander lead mortgage lenders in latest wave of price rises on fixed rate deals. Majority of Tory voters blame the government for the housing crunch. This according to new polling for the newspaper. Mortgage brokers predict 7% fixed rate deals by late summer unless inflation is suddenly tamed. The Mirror next, really tragic story. Fiona Phillips, what a brilliant broadcaster and a fabulous person. My hope, Alzheimer's has already taken a whole big chunk out of my life, but now I want to try to make things better for people. We love that woman. She's an amazing lady and we wish her well. The Daily Mail. Alzheimer's came for my mother, then my father, and now, as I've long dreaded, it's come for me. Fiona Phillips there in the Mail as well. AI chatbot told Windsor intruder to kill the Queen. And Katie cleans up Just Stop Oil, then wipes the floor with her opponent. Daily Express, Lords must not defy the will of the people. Obstructive peers were accused of frustrating the will of the people tonight as they ripped up laws aimed at ending the small boats crisis. The Archbishop of Canterbury, the Most Reverend Justin Welby, led the onslaught against government plans to deport migrants who reach the UK illegally. Guardian, lung cancer diagnoses in women to outnumber men's for the first time. Fossil fuel lobbyists also work for climate groups. And a royal row, Charles faces protests at coronation in Scotland. Those are your front pages. Now more on the media buzz with our superstar panel. Conservative peer, Baroness Foster, businessman and activist, Adam Brooks, and former Labour Party advisor, Matthew Larser. Now, well-heeled lovey and former Countdown presenter Carol Vorderman has been building a reputation for Tory bashing, challenging former footballers Gary Lineker and Gary Neville for the role of virtue signaller in chief. Here she is in action.
Ever in my lifetime have I seen what is patently a corrupt government like this one, where they are taking from the poor and they are giving to the already rich.
But Felicity Cornelius Mercer, whose husband is veteran Minister Johnny Mercer, has hit back at Vorders in an explosive interview with Boris Johnson's sister, Rachel Johnson. Take a listen.
Well, I don't know what it is. She just drives me up the wall. I mean, I'm not usually, get stressed out by people, but what for me, it's this idea of, okay, these celebrity attack dogs that know nothing about politics. I mean, there's definitely an argument to be had about that. But I understand everyone has an opinion on politics, don't they? But for me, it's this blanket hatred. It's like inciting people to hate all Tories. Hate all Tories.
So are woke celebrities like Carol Vorderman, Gary Neville and Gary Lineker inciting hatred against Conservative supporters, even those who are just small c Conservatives? Adam.
Yes. Carol Vorderman is a massive hypocrite. She's as fake as her face and her body. She gives it out on Twitter with this aggressive bile and, attacks daily. Yet when she see Matt Hancock at the races, she was laughing and joking in his company. I can't do that. If I see an MP, and I've seen many recently, I've had a chat about what's gone wrong and I've challenged them on certain things. Yes, I do go for MPs on Twitter. I'm known for that. But if I see them in public, I will say the same thing. A Labour one told me you had a nice but detailed conversation with you, Adam. Right, exactly that. So people think, I'm mouthy and I'm annoyed. We'd never say that. Look, I do bump into Labour MPs and we have a chat and a reasonable discussion. This hate that is directed at the Tories started from people like John McDonnell of the Labour Party, when he said that Tories in public should be hounded. Yeah. And we did see that with Jacob Rees-Mogg and his children. He also said that Esther McVeigh should be lynched. We had Angela Rayner that said, where's the quote? Tories are homophobic, racist, misogynic scum. Now, she had to apologise for that. We've also had David Lammy calling ERG members the likes of Nazis. So This hatred stems from the left, and their activists, and now the celebrity activists, don't stop. It's terrible. I don't agree with a lot of what the Tories do, but I would never hound a Tory MP in public or abuse them.
Matthew, are the Be Kind lefties the worst?
Well, I think they can be, because when we say lefties, as you're saying small C conservatives, I'm always slightly wondering how many of these have ever actually voted Labour in their life. You know, maybe Gary Neville has. I think he quite fancies being the Labour mayor of Greater Manchester. Although somebody uncovered an article he'd written a couple of weeks ago, uncovered it from a couple of years ago, which said that he basically backs Jackie on lower taxes and is basically a Thatcherite. So, you know, their inconsistency. I think there is a role for celebrities in politics. I think celebrities and people with a public profile can take issues. They can take issues forward.
If they introduce this venom, this hatred,
I think that sort of performative Twitter warriorism is over the top, and using it to boost your career is not a great look. You need to be consistent, and you need to pick on an actual cause rather than just firing off a few tweets.
And not be a hypocrite like Gary Neville, Gary Lineker, and Carol.
Like the footballer, like Marcus Rashford, who on his, it was very clear on the free school meals in the pandemic. Whatever you thought of it, he stuck. It was one cause. It was clear. It was actually a thing. It wasn't just a tweet.
I don't know if any of you caught a video from the very talented comedy actor Simon Pegg, who's in the Mission Impossible films, and he had a British sitcom in this country called Spaced, and Shaun of the Dead, the movie, right? Pretty talented guy. But he was sat in his car and he did a video about the fact that Rishi Sunak wanted to boost standards of mathematics in this country. And he went completely ballistic and he said, F the Tories, and he called Rishi Sunak a P-R-I-C-K, Jackie. These people, I think they've lost it. I think they're sort of not right in the head. They seem deranged.
Well, I don't think they've been quite right in the head for decades. I mean, I've been a Tory activist. I mean, I've been active in the party for 35 years. I mean, the irony for the Labour Party is quite difficult sometimes. I was actually a trade union negotiator in my early life. Didn't support the Labour Party, but actually pretty good at what I did. But what you've had, what's evolved, you moved away from old Labour, and it started a bit in the 70s and the 80s, actually, with the sort of Derek Hattons, if you remember what happened.
And that was pretty toxic, wasn't it?
That was toxic. And then you got this rise of momentum. And then you've had over the
anti-Semitism.
The last few years, and this is the hypocrisy. You've got the Gary Nevilles, and you've got Gary Lineker, and you've got others like Carol. I don't particularly want to personalise them.
Oh, please,
I don't really want to, but, you know, I might as well. And, I mean, they're just total hypocrites, frankly. And they...
Millionaire socialists.
Well, the champagne socialists. And they talk about the poor. I mean, you'd think they were working-class heroes.
It's the Just Stop Oil ones in the private planes that get me.
That half the Labour Party were, you know, working-class heroes. I don't think they know anything about the working class.
Can you name a single celebrity on the political right that's as abusive as Vorderman and the like?
There isn't anybody.
Well, Jim Davidson of this parish, who was a Tory supporter, is quite robust. But I think that people should watch what they say, and they sometimes discredit.
Do you disown Carol Vorderman? Would you like to reject her as a Labour supporter? Well, she's hardly a Tory supporter, is she?
Oh no, but that is different. And if Labour's in government, you'll see. You know, dare we mention the days of the Iraq War, where a lot of the lovies went for the hills, and the ones who stayed, like Richard Wilson and David Tennant and people, I have more respect for because they stuck by their party when it was.
Well, would you reject Carol Vorderman from joining the Labour Party if she asked you? Say we don't want toxic people like you in our party.
But can I just make a brief point?
That would exclude me a member.
If the lovies can do what they want. They can say what they like. And it says more about them, frankly, if they're going to sing to these depths. But when they actually see, they're obviously Labour card carrying hold, you know, we know that. I mean, it's quite obvious from their politics. However, when they then hear Labour politicians using language like this, whether it's Angela Rayner and others, you never hear Tories describe Labour members of Parliament in that way.
Angela was wrong and she apologised, but
it's not just Angela. You had all the anti-Semitism.
All right,
and we kick them out.
One last thing: it has become trendy to bash the Tories. Whether you like them or not, it has become a trendy thing for young people and celebrities to do.
OK, well, I think some of these champagne socialists might get a nasty surprise at the next election, but let's see. They're at it again, folks. The nation's favourite killjoys, deluded middle-class thugs, Just Stop Oil, have set their sights on the greatest tennis tournament in the world, Wimbledon. With play halted on Court 18 twice today after a protester threw confetti on the grass during British #1 Katie Boulter's first-round match. Why don't they go and throw confetti at the Chinese Open in Beijing instead? After all, China are responsible for the most pollution in the world. Let's see how the authorities take to their peaceful protests over there. After attacking the rugby and cricket, can't these entitled numpties, who seem to be on a permanent university gap year, give us all a break? Stunts like this will always backfire, and today it was game, set and match for the brave officials who dragged them off the court. New balls, please. Now, coming up, can the King see off the growing Republican threat? We discuss this as I crown tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. But next, in Uncancelled, with theatres across the country clearly not afraid of go woke, go broke, as black-only audiences cause uproar and The Sound of Music is hit with a trigger warning about Nazis, the Queen of GB News, Nana Akua, joins me live to hit back at the virtue-signalling loons determined to spoil British entertainment. Nana's next. You won't want to miss it.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Mark Dolan in for Dan Wootton this week and next. Great to have your company. It's time for Uncancelled, where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. And just a few hours ago, an East London theatre finally went ahead with a highly controversial black-only performance that kept a play free of what organisers called the white gaze. Tambo and Bones, a production said to explore 300 years of African-American history, tonight encouraged white people to stay away from the prestigious Theatre Royal Stratford East. We'll show the full video on tomorrow's show, but here's a taste of what our brilliant reporter, Ben Leo, was told tonight when he was asking theatregoers what Martin Luther King might have made of it all.
His famous quote, of course, where he says, "I had a dream that my children would be judged on the content of the character, not the colour of their skin."
What he was saying was that all people should be judged evenly, but we are not judged evenly in the traditional theatre spaces.
How are black people treated unfairly in theatre? Can you give some examples?
Oh, I'm not here to go into that now because this is a very casual interview outside of another event, and I have many, many experiences of being treated as other within the spaces I am working by people who are in the audience. I'm not talking about theatre and
audience members.
By audience members.
So what would they do? Just
No. This is not honouring my experience to come and try and trivialise it by just giving you some short answer.
I'm not trivialising.
I'm saying it would. I'm not saying you are.
Well, GB News star Nana Akua has lashed out at the segregated performance and slammed organisers for using, quote, the language of apartheid. And Nana joins me now. Nana, great to see you. All of this is rooted in an idea called critical race theory. Can you give us a flavour of what that actually means and why it's so controversial?
Oh, God, where do I start with it? Well, I mean, it's a nonsense ideology that would suggest that black people, you need to be aware of the person's race and then you must understand their race. So things like white privilege will come out as a result of that, which gives the assumption that white people are initially privileged already because of the colour of their skin, and therefore they need to acknowledge that and therefore, in a way, understand that black people will feel persecuted. And I have issue with critical race theory on many levels. But obviously, the problem I have with this whole ideology is that ultimately it kind of it means the black person is the victim. Ultimately, it's a victimhood mentality, and for that I find it most offensive because I don't think I'm a victim. I don't believe I should immediately think I'm a victim just because of the colour of my skin. It puts me on the back foot, and it also gives the idea that somebody is privileged by me accepting the narrative that I am a victim, and that's not acceptable by any chalk.
Nana, some would argue that you just can't be racist to white people. Do they have a point?
You can be racist to anybody. Black people can be racist towards even each other, and white people can be racist towards each other as well, as we've seen. I mean, if you look at sometimes in Scotland, you've got the SNP and some of the way that Nicola Sturgeon and some of the members of her party may speak towards people who are English, they're both the same colour, but yet they act as though there are different races. Ultimately, we are all one race, which is the human race. So the idea of racism is actually, it's something that's been created, and it's just divisive. There's no real reason to it, and there's no, you don't really know what I'm like just because I'm black. It doesn't mean that I'm going to follow any narrative that's been set aside. Anything that suggests that I behave in a certain way because of the colour of my skin is simply a stereotype and doesn't reflect anything that I have learnt or that I know. So I find it offensive that this particular performance would decide that because you are a different colour, you shouldn't come in. And that's just for one day only, though, so it's okay. It isn't okay because it sets a very, very bad precedent. Because if you can do it one way for one day, you can do it the other way round. And I kind of feel that those very people would take deep offence if you said a white-only event for one day only. That would not be acceptable.
Well, I agree. It's like Martin Luther King never happened. Nana, I've got a shocking story for you, and it's going to be really hard to repeat this anecdote, but our brilliant reporter, Ben Leo, who was out and about just, you know, at this particular performance of a black-only show, and he actually pointed out your criticisms of this performance to the people at the event. And one of them said, well, Nana Akua is not a real black person because of her views.
Well, you see, that's ironic, isn't it? That suddenly the colour of my skin is no longer relevant when it comes to my views, but yet I would be allowed into the theatre performance because I'm black. It's just a nonsense, really. There is no such thing as a set type of behaviour for a black person. And actually, the fact that they've made a judgment based on the colour of my skin is exactly what I said before. Black people being racist towards black people. The amount of times I've been called a coconut because I'm supposedly meant to think a certain way because of the colour of my skin, and because I have narrowed or veered off the path or come out of my lane, in their view, I'm no longer a black person. And that has to stop, because that is a pure judgment based on what you think I should be doing because of the colour of my skin. And I find it absurd. I don't look at a white person and think, oh, well, you must think this, this and this, and you're going to say that, that and that, and you will see things this way because of the colour of your skin. It's absolutely ridiculous.
We would both argue, wouldn't we, Nana, for women-only spaces, female-only spaces, and perhaps even men-only spaces. So what's different about a black-only space?
Well, I mean, one is based on the strength. So the reason why these spaces are divided initially is because women are very vulnerable when it comes to men. If you look at the murders and the rapes and the things, it's mostly the majority of it is men on women. So that's with regard to women's safety. Doesn't matter what colour you are with regard to that division. That's because of an actual thing that is there. That is a general thing that men are just stronger than women, and the majority of murders and rapes and so on and so forth are perpetuated by men towards women. So that's why it's done like that, to protect women. Not all men are going to be violent, but it's a way of protecting women. There is nothing in it that would suggest you can't tell if I'm going to be an aggressive black person or a very gentle one just because I'm a different colour. It means nothing.
Nana, in another example of the world of theatre going completely mad, have you seen this story? Chichester Festival in West Sussex is giving trigger warnings to audience members of The Sound of Music because there's Nazis in it. The world's gone mad.
Well, blow me down. I mean, it was set in that era anyway, so why would you need to be warned? I mean, I was reading about it, and one of the rabbis said it's just so patronising that you think that people are so weak that they will be offended by a particular production that is set in that era and be offended to find that it's in that era. I mean, if you don't like The Sound of Music or that would offend you, then you just don't buy the ticket and don't go.
Nana, I am chemically addicted to your show. Nana's back on Saturday at 3 o'clock. Brilliant to have you on the programme tonight. Brilliant stuff. Well, it's time now to reveal today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. So, to reveal, there's my superstar panel, Baroness Foster, Adam Brooks and Matthew Larser. There you go. I managed to get a quick wink in whilst we were waiting. Come on, Sebastian. Let's speed things up in the gallery, shall we? OK, let's start with Baroness Foster. Who is your Greatest Britain today?
My Greatest Britain today is Catherine, who I think is absolutely wonderful. And we had this great second coronation today up in Scotland with His Majesty the King and Queen. And I think she is a great representative for this country. It was great to see her wearing Catherine Walker and obviously promoting great British design. And so she's my Greatest Britain today.
Brilliant stuff. OK, now let's hear from Adam. Adam, who's your Greatest Britain?
My nomination is for GB News presenter Patrick Christie.
Woohoo!
For raising almost £130,000 for the charity, mental health charity Mind. He did a dance routine with the Dream Boys. He looks great. I'm really proud of him.
Absolutely. And Matthew, how about you, your Greatest Britain?
Well, it's Fiona Phillips, who you rightly paid tribute to earlier, who has spoken up about her own dementia diagnosis, having spoken out on the issue and gained such respect for speaking out on the issue for so long, and in particular struck by how she says that life won't stop with dementia, even though, obviously, it's a big blow.
We covered this last night. Let's take a listen.
Because this disease has had such an impact on my family, it's absolutely decimated. My mum, my dad, my Uncle Barry. It just goes on and on. It's just I'm just doing what I normally do. Fabulous. So, yeah. Otherwise, what do I?
Well, I love our Greatest Britain nominees tonight, and of course the honorary winner will definitely be that very, very brave and talented woman. But I've got to give it to Patrick Christie. He's raised money for charity, transformed his body, and an absolute star here on GB News. Well done, Patrick. OK, Union Jackass, Baroness Foster, do your worst.
Well, I'll stay on the royal theme, and today it was the group called Republica, who all turned out in force to obviously harass the King and Queen and make known that they are Republicans as though we don't know. And really, I think they should have really just stayed at home and had the day off.
There you go. OK, how about you, Adam, your Union Jackass?
My nomination is TfL for losing their marbles and banning a West End theatre advert on the tube because it featured an unhealthy-looking cake. These need to stop telling us what to think and do and stop trying to control what we do in our lives.
Yes, definitely. What a dreadful story. Matthew, your Union jackass.
It's Transport Secretary Mark Harper, who has stood by and basically coordinated train companies saying they're going to close every ticket office. Do you know how many combinations of tickets there are in this country? 55 million. And the lovely men and women of our ticket offices guide us through. Instead, tourists, older people, going to lose out, and of course the rail companies are going to be quids in.
OK, well, the winner is TfL, who can shove that cake down their cake hole. Thank you to my brilliant panel tonight and my fantastic team behind the scenes. And, of course, your company on the radio and on television. We'll do it all again tomorrow. I'm back at 9 o'clock. In fact, it's a very, very busy show altogether. Tomorrow night, we've got my strong monologue, which I've got to keep under wraps until tomorrow's papers and our brilliant panel. And I'm here for the next 11 nights. That's right, I'll be doing my show and Dan's this week and next. It's been a real treat. And Headliners is next with a look at tomorrow's papers in a jovial fashion. I'll see you tomorrow at 9.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really